Greetings, good storytellers. I am the Artful Narrator, and it is my privilege to welcome you to learning the tropes of writing. Now, as writers, we know that no matter how we might, try to hide important plot points or nice bits of foreshadowing in our story, the very nature of narrative puts us at a disadvantage. Because whether they fully realize it or not, the audience knows that what they're witnessing is a story, and that everything was placed in that story for a purpose. And so, even if they aren't actively trying to scrutinize the story, their mind in the background, their subconscious mind, will be working and assigning context and significance to everything. And while it is possible, certainly, especially in longer narratives, for things in stories to be there merely to add flavor or richness to the culture or the history of the world that you've created, or excellent bits of backstory to one of the supporting characters. Still, there is the suspicion that anything in the story that isn't instantly apparent might have some significance later on. And so, therein is the problem that writers must face. How do we disguise the significance of these plot points? Because we know that while you can sometimes cheat it and not foreshadow things, the impact is so much richer, so much more profound if you can slide it in under the radar and then spring it on the audience. And other times, indeed, it actually can be seen as quite negative and cheap or shoddy in the story. For example, say if at the end of the story a chosen one is revealed and comes and saves the day, well, if there was no foreshadowing that such an individual existed, it can feel like a deus ex machina and leave the audience with a sour taste in their mouths, as opposed to leave them standing and applauding and the wonderful twist of this character coming in and when all the clues were there, but they didn't have the eyes to see it. So this problem is what I want to address with today's video, with a technique called the Purloined plot point. Now, the Purloined plot point, of course, draws its name from a wonderful short story by Edgar Allan Poe titled The Purloined Letter, in which a bit of blackmail, the titular Purloined Letter, is searched for, the suspect's room gone over multiple times over multiple days. However, that letter is unable to be discovered because the police are expecting it to be hidden someplace brilliant, in under a floorboard or in some hidden alcove. But no, it is instead hidden in plain sight, having merely been folded over once, the guilty party's name written, address written upon it, and their seal placed upon it, so that it looks like a bit of innocuous correspondence. Its context is changed, so that when the police look at it, that they do not have a mystery, they have a certainty. This is something else, something we need not bother ourselves with. And so that ability of changing the context is what I'm going to show you how to do in your writing. Because, again, we can't just, as much as we might want, if we try to not focus on something that we've slid out there, give it no visible context, just, and here's this thing, you don't need to worry about it, though, it's one of those, bits of character fluff, bit of world building, it doesn't have any significance, don't pay attention to it. By not giving it any attention, by not giving it any context, we run the risk of the audience trying to figure out what context it might really serve. So like the Purloined Letter, we need to disguise it as something else, give it different context, so that the audience can examine it, find it to be seemingly nothing of huge merit, and then quickly forget about it. Now, for the first example of this, of the way in which the context can be changed, and more importantly, the narrative that the audience creates in their heads, can be changed comes not from the usual source that I like to draw things from a movie or a book or even a fictional TV show, but in fact from a wonderful bit of live improvisation that happened during the Graham Norton show, on an episode in which Chris Pratt was a guest. And though known for his comedic and acting talents, Graham asked, I believe that you have a bit of skill as a magician. Could you show us a trick? And so Chris, with a wonderful mix of bravado and chagrin, and goes, all right, well, the trick I'm going to show you is called Burnham, and it works 50% of the time. And what he proceeds to do is something that I would say very few magicians, and outside of maybe your friend at a bar, is able to do. And that's change the narrative of the expectations of the audience. Because when we see magic in a professional setting, we don't expect that when the magician, finally pulls the last card and says, is this your card? We don't expect them to be wrong. No, we fully anticipate that they will indeed, do what they claim to do. They will perform this act of magic. And the joy doesn't come in the surprise that they did it. The joy comes in the grandiose spectacle that they create and the mystery of just how did they do that, though? Of trying to beat them at their own game and figure out, see the tells where they might have swapped the card or changed its position in the deck. But what Chris does with his background in comedy, with his wonderful buffoonish air, is he makes you believe that he's royally screwed this up. And he purposely chose a trick that wonderfully facilitates this, because as he describes it, he has 4 chances to try to get the card right. And so he goes, all right, is this your card? Is this your card? And Will.i.am says, no, it's not that. And Chris is putting down he's burning the cards, or it's discarding them in a separate pile. And then we already know seemingly all the cards that are in that pile. And then he goes and holds it back up again. It's like, so you're sure it's not one of these? And is showing us this card and this card, seemingly showing us all the cards in that deck. And by at this point, everyone's trying to move on. It's like, all right, even wonderful Jennifer Lawrence is there, and she's trying to cover for him, and just like, oh, it's all right, you did okay. And then he finally says, wait, stop. Up, takes those cards, puts them in Will.i.am's fist, says, all right, now hold them tight, slaps them, and the one remaining card says, is that your card? Will turns it over, and yes, it is. And the shock, the awe on everyone's face, the joy is all the more apparent because he didn't just do a magic trick. He changed the narrative. If he had done that trick without all the extra banter and making everyone think that he'd screwed it up, people would be impressed, certainly, but they would be impressed in the polite way that everyone is when someone does a magic trick. We are, in awe of their ability to do something like that, but we're not surprised. But here, everyone in their minds changed the narrative of this moment from I'm watching a magician performing magic to I'm watching the wonderful Chris Pratt blunder into a magic trick that he maybe heard once or twice, practiced a little bit a few years ago, and has totally forgot by this point. And he's just adding as much comedy to it as he can to make it so that the audience can enjoy something of it. He changes the context, he changes the narrative, and it's brilliant. But let's actually look at an example of that in a story. How do you do that in a story? Well, I have 2 examples here. One has an extra layer of meta-narrative, which makes it quite interesting. But I think I'm actually going to go with a different example first. Now, this example has to do with something that's very, very, very hard to use in stories. That's prophecy. Because, again, in a real-world setting, if you hear, there's a prophecy that, blah, blah, blah is going to happen, you don't even give it a second thought. But in a story, when the word prophecy is spoken, even by the most inconsequential, most ridiculous, just side character, you instantly are just laser focused on it. Prophecy, great, right? How's this going to affect the story? Prophecy isn't brought up in a story unless it's going to be paid off. So how do you do it? How do you bring up prophecy and make people not instantly be spending the rest of the story saying, all right, well, when's the prophecy thing going to happen? When's the fourfold hero going to come? It was referenced. That's what this movie does, and does brilliantly. And I've talked about it before, but I love it so much. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. It is the wonderful classic, The Thief of Baghdad. Now, in this story, we are introduced to King Ahmed. And he is just very sullen as a ruler because he wants to make his people happy. But his Grand Vizier, Jaffa, tells him that, no, your people are wicked. They must be ruled with an iron fist. If you would know your people as I know them and as your father knew them, do as he did. Go in disguise at night and go into their homes, their houses. Speak to them. And you will know. Then you will learn, as I know, that they are evil. Ahmed is very excited by this, and so he does as Jaffa suggests. That very night, in disguise, he walks among his people. And what does he come upon but an old wise man sitting there and telling the gathered people of a prophecy. And the wise man speaks thusly, saying, "It is told, though Allah is wiser or more merciful, there was in the past of the ages a king among kings, a master of arms and of armies, of vassals and auxiliaries. And this master of time and people was an oppressor to both, and the earth was as pitch in the faces of his subjects and his slaves, and they groaned together in secret." And here Ahmed turns to another listener and says, "What is he saying?" And the listener, instantly suspicious, says, "Why, I do not know." And Ahmed says, "Is it the king he is talking about?" And shushing him, the listener says, "Don't ask such questions. There are spies everywhere. You must be careful in Baghdad." And the wise man continues, saying, "And they groaned together in secret, and were slain in the marketplace. But a wise man among the sated of Baghdad comforted them with a prophecy, saying, In the fullness of years a liberator shall come upon you, and this shall be the sign of him. He shall be the lowest of the low, and you shall look for him in the clouds." And the people cry, "We shall look for him in the clouds indeed, for if the great are powerless to save us from this tyrant, how can one of no account avail?" And the reader of the Milky Way replied, "Have faith, trust in Allah, for there one day in the blue you shall see a boy, the lowest of the low, mounted upon a cloud. But that cloud shall be as strong as the hills beneath the snow, and from the ranges of the sky he shall destroy this tyrant with the arrow of justice." And at this, another listener says, "And what is the name of the tyrant?" And many of the others say, "Ahmed, Ahmed, Ahmed." And instantly there is anger and sorrow in Ahmed's face as he sees how his people view him as this cruel monster. And in one moment, the story and the writer has made us forget the prophecy, made us ignore its true significance by giving it a different significance. We've just been presented a prophecy, but rather than taking this for what it is, as foreshadowing, we instead believe that this was a concise and convenient way in a single scene to paint the way in which Jaffa's wisdom, his pushing for Ahmed to rule his people with an iron fist, how that has poisoned them against him, how that has caused them to view him as this monster. And so it happens that, of course, when Jaffa betrays him and throws him into the jail, when we are then introduced to a young thief by the name of Abu. Yes, this movie inspired Disney's Aladdin. We are introduced to this boy, and he helps Ahmed escape, and they go off and have adventures. This boy, the lowest of the low, this thief of Baghdad, we don't give any thought to it. We don't wonder if he is that boy that was referenced in the prophecy. And sure enough, when later Ahmed is captured by Jaffa and about to be executed, Abu, having since met with a genie, he stolen an all-seeing eye and had any number of wondrous adventures, comes to his friend's rescue, mounted upon a flying carpet and wielding a golden bow. And it is not until, even when he is riding that carpet, we don't instantly make the connection until as he comes in and all the people are gathered around to watch Ahmed's execution, we hear the old wise man telling the prophecy again, and they see the lowest of the low, the boy mounted upon the cloud. And they rise up and help Abu to slay the tyrant Jaffa with the arrow of justice and free his friend. And it is a moment of great joy and brilliance, and a moment that hits far more majestically than if it had happened without that bit of foreshadowing. I've said it before that this scene is brilliant because it is prophecy where the protagonist, where the thief of Baghdad who is prophesized, is not aided or does not do anything because he knows that it's what the prophesized person is supposed to do. He does it purely because it's what he wants to do with his own agency. And it is brilliant because it is an example. Hi, Socks. Yeah, my cat wants me to play with her. Sorry. It is an example of how you can present prophecy in your story, but disguise its significance early on, so that when it comes to pass later, it creates this beautiful moment. So there you have a narrative example of how to disguise a plot point. But let's go one step harder. Let's go to something that not just had to overcome this narrative hurdle, but also a meta-narrative hurdle, and how they managed to use this to their advantage. Now, this final example that I'm talking about is another movie that I've talked about before, much more recently in this instance, the wonderful Knives Out. Now, while both of these other subjects contained spoilers, they are either for exceedingly old but exceedingly beautiful movies, or for an episode of The Graham Norton Show. So I did not necessarily feel the need to put a spoiler warning. But for this last one, I will put a spoiler warning, and rather than have my hand up, I will follow the example of the wonderful commenter in the last episode and leave a linked comment in the video with a timestamp of where you can go to skip over the spoilers for Socks. I'm trying to finish this, please. Skip over the spoilers for Knives Out, because it is a marvelous movie and should be watched. Spoiler free. Now, spoilers from here on out. In Knives Out, the writer has several extra hurdles that they must overcome. Beyond that base level that I've talked about, there is the inherent problems with telling a mystery story. More specifically, a live-action mystery story. Because in a book, you do not have stars assigned to play the different suspects. And so, while some suspects may be written in a more dynamic way that makes you believe that they might be more suspicious, that is a world different than having a big-name star play a character. To its credit, Knives Out features a star-studded cast, but there is one character that stands out, or at least should stand out, and that is the role of Ransom, Hugh, the bad boy, as we later learn, disinherited grandson of the old author, who is played by none other than another Marvel Cinematic Universe Chris Evans. Now, there is a sort of unspoken rule in mystery stories, movies and TV shows specifically, which states that there are 4 great roles in which you can expect a star to play. The role of the detective, the role of the detective's friend, the role of the murdered individual, or the role of the murderer themselves, by far the juiciest role. And so we would expect a individual of Chris S. Evans' caliber to be in one of those roles. He's not the detective played by why did I do this late at night? Daniel Craig. I wanted to say Daniel Radcliffe, but I didn't. Just saved myself. But yeah, it's not Daniel Craig. No. Oh. So, what role does he have? Well, the movie addresses this in a wonderful way. First and foremost, similar to the way the Thief of Baghdad introduced the prophecy before we had met Abu, here, the beginning of the almost said the Thief of Baghdad again. The beginning of Knives Out presents us with a story in which we believe that we already know who the killer is. We believe that it is Marta Cabrera, the nurse of the author, who unknowingly gave him the wrong injection and brought about his death. And so, instantly, some suspicion is removed from him. Further suspicion is removed when, as I've been saying all along, we are allowed to assign context to him, because without context, he is still just one of the heirs. And again, he is a very big star, and we can expect he would be in this movie to do more than just be a supporting character. And so it is brilliant that when it is revealed that Marta is the one who is going to inherit all of the old man's money and estate, and all the heirs turn on her, that he comes and gives her a ride out of there to safety. And then, and with a bit of a scoundrelly air, tricks her into explaining exactly what's going on. And as he listens to her story of her explaining how she accidentally gave the old man the wrong injection, and he then gives a story of how, yes, he was removed from the will. Well, he had a big argument with the old man, and all these things that should make us suspect him more. But he frames it in the context that he has, had thought about this all night and realized that the old man was right, that he does need to make a name for himself. He's been relying on the family's money too much. He needs to go out there and do something. But he's not going to go out there and do something with no money, so he says, I will help you, Marta, in exchange for you cutting me in for some of that money. And so now what he has successfully done, what the narrative has successfully done, is frame him not as one of the possible suspects, but as that friend of the protagonist role. And more specifically, it has given him the context here of the sort of bad boy with a heart of gold, which is significant because it works with the meta-narrative. Now, the meta-narrative that this movie had to contend with was the fact that it came fresh on the heels of Avengers Endgame. I believe it was came out several months after it, although it's hard to remember things from the before times, so I'm not exactly sure. But so what this meant is that this is Chris Evans. This is Captain America. He's been playing this just wonderful, clean-cut, super goody two-shoes. It was, language. Captain America for years. Obviously, he had other roles before that, and he had other roles during that, but still, there is this vision of him as the good guy. And in the same way that certain actors, when cast in a movie, will instantly attract suspicion because they play such wonderful villains, here we would expect him to play the good guy. But that can work against him here. Once more, as the meta-narrative, we wonder, well, what's he going to do? Oh, he's a big star. What role is he playing in this movie? But here, by casting him, if they'd even cast him as a good guy, we might almost suspect him more, but no, they cast him as the bad boy. And it has this... Whoops. Okay, I thought my computer was dying. It has this wonderful air of, yes, he's fresh after all these years of being the good guy, being the hero. He wants to stretch his wings a little bit, flex his acting talent, and see if he can play some more, nefarious or rough roles. And so here, but he's not going to go too far. Damn it, it's late. I'm tired. He's not going to go too far out of what we expect of him. He's just going to play a bad boy with the heart of gold. It's great. And so, on the meta-narrative level, on the actual in-story level, we've now been given context for what he's doing, what his role in the story is. It's all perfect. It makes sense. We no longer suspect him. So then how brilliant is it when it is revealed that he was, in fact, the murderer all along? There was every clue in the world pointing to him from the get-go, from the very poster for the movie. We should have suspected him. But the movie does the work to make us believe that he is there for other reasons. It assigns different context to him. It weaves a different narrative for his reason to be in the story, and it allows us to overlook him. That is what the Purloined plot point is. Allowing the audience to assign a different narrative, to assign different significance to your foreshadowing, so that when that plot point later comes to fruition, they can be surprised. They can have that moment of joy where they overlooked something and now see it pay off in the most brilliant manner possible. So whether you are having to contend with those extra meta levels of casting and perception of the actors, or whether you're just trying to hide a wonderful revelation and for your story that's going to come in later chapters, I hope that, as always, this video has been informative, or at the very least, a pleasant diversion. Until next time.